There are so many games coming out in 2023, and after seeing all of the showcases at the Game Awards, I now have more FOMO than I normally do when it comes to experiencing all of the different types of art that this medium has to offer. However, one game that's been on my radar for quite a while is Forspoken, and this game got a teeny little sliver of the spotlight during the Game Awards, and after their showcase, they had a little outro bumper saying that you could download a demo now, and so I did. My initial feelings before even playing this game were a little reserved. I don't know why, but I feel like Sony and Square Enix are being a little quiet about this game. Not as if they're trying to hide anything, but it doesn't seem to really be getting the attention that most Sony exclusives do, even if this is only a timed exclusive. This makes my initial gut reaction lean towards this game being like Days Gone. Obviously not a zombies third-person open world game, but more so that the hype just isn't really there for it. That's not an insult to Days Gone or Forspoken, as I know they will have their fan bases, but are they going to knock it out of the park like a Final Fantasy 16 or a God of War Ragnarok? Unfortunately, I still think it's a little too soon to tell, but there is actually quite a bit to discuss from the demo itself. Fortunately, in my opinion, there's a lot more positive than negative just from like a feelings standpoint, but the main point of contention that worries me here is the combat. It just doesn't quite hit it for me. With January 2023 right around the corner, will Forspoken stick the landing? Will it become a cult classic, or will it be cast aside and forgotten before it even has a chance to come into its own? This is a Forspoken preview. You may have noticed in the intro block that I stated that this was a timed Sony exclusive, and you might be thinking to yourself, so what? Sony does this stuff all the time. Who cares? Get on with it. Why don't you? Well, I think this is a bit of a bigger deal than usual because this timed exclusivity is lasting for 2 years, whereas generally it's just for 1 year. And with games like Call of Duty, they will create timed exclusive modes or zombies content, stuff like that. And I'm not going to lie, this hurts everyone at launch, and in my opinion is such short-term thinking for Square Enix. Sure, initially, things will be exciting for Forspoken, and it will have its 5 minutes of fame, but even games as big as Elden Ring will eventually peter out and we'll all move on to the next trendy item. And what I think is somewhat bothersome is that this game has already been delayed twice from its original release date of May in 2022. So what would have been a summer of 2024 release for Xbox fans is now going to be bumped up to January of 2025. I think that's pretty crazy and very unfortunate, as not only will the game have lost steam, but who the hell knows what the industry will be doing at that point in time. It's really unfortunate for fans of Xbox. Now, something that I've been enjoying as of recently is this new trend of accessibility menus, and I hope it continues on further into the future. And while I don't have a disability other than just being a moron, it's nice to be able to customize your game to your exact liking. Now, I'm sure accessibility menus have been becoming more in-depth over the last few years, but it really started to pick up steam and even become mainstream with games like The Last of Us Remake for the PS5 and God of War Ragnarok. So I'm very glad to see console players get a ton of options, just like PC players have been for a long time. Things like aim assist, damage received, stamina recovery, auto heal, and evade, just some really nice quality of life features that I think make the experience much more fluid for players who are not necessarily looking for some steep challenge in their game, or perhaps they just have vision impairment or something else I'm not even aware of. And the customization continues on into the display settings tab. Just like the aforementioned games and many more, Forspoken is equipped with a ray tracing mode, a performance mode, and a quality focused mode. Ray tracing obviously enables ray tracing and graphically enhanced visuals. In my opinion, I have a really hard time seeing the differences with ray tracing unless there is a side-by-side image and I have to be actively looking for it. So I don't really care about this. If you do, then there you go. The option is right there. Quality focused is graphics over frame rate. And on my first playthrough of the demo, I used quality focused over performance. And as you would expect, the slower frame rate does impact things like combat. It makes it feel less fluid. However, on my second playthrough, when I turned on performance mode, it really unlocked a whole different experience for me. From what I could tell, the gameplay was locked at 60 frames a second. I did notice a bit of frame dropping when there was a lot of particle effects on the screen, but that was pretty rare and it wasn't that big of a deal in my opinion. The graphics do suffer a bit, but not to any level worth complaining about. Just some smooth texture models, stuff like that. Again, not a big deal, but it's worth mentioning nonetheless. I haven't decided which platform I'm going to be playing on because since it's not coming to Xbox for 2 years, I might get it on the PC, which could be a nice way to get that high graphical fidelity and an even higher frame rate boost, making combat feel maybe even better than it does on PlayStation 5 from that performance perspective. Now, the combat impact, like I said, I'm a little iffy about, but we're not going to talk about that just yet.
Yep, no sweat. That went pretty well.
So what is this game about? Who are you? Why are you where you are? What is exactly going on? Well, from what I understand, you are Frey Holland, a young girl from the streets of New York who gets teleported to a magical land called Athia or Athia. When she arrives, she is a bit confused, but she realizes that she is able to connect with a bracelet that wraps around her arms and gives her magical abilities. Oh yeah, and the bracelet talks.
Can't be very satisfying facing enemies of this caliber.
Yeah, it does feel kind of pointless.
Okay, you have my attention. The setup for stories like this isn't really what pulls me in, it's more the route they take with it and how the world building is and all of that stuff. Now, a major theme with this preview is that it's a lot of too soon to tell, but I am definitely a little concerned with the narrative element of this game for a few reasons. The first reason is the tonality of the game. It's clear that Square is building some pretty magnificent worlds. If you look at the promo material and the in-game cinematics, they are creating multiple biomes or realms that are really looking quite magnificent, and I'm totally into that. What I am not into is this weird hodgepodge of modern New York aesthetic and old mythology, and you can hear it in the way that they have created the music. There is this epic mythological, like orchestral kind of sound, and then they mix it with like overly produced beats. And the way they have Frey dress is a mix between being like a tough New Yorker and a mythological warrior. And even the way the bracelet and Frey have dialogue between one another just seems awkward and not fully realized, as Frey talks like a modern person in 2022 or 2023, and the bracelet has a more traditional way of speaking.
Reasonably impressive, I suppose.
Reasonably? Kiss my ass.
Now, it's not even that I think this mix of artistic stylization is bad, it just feels not very thought out, and it worries me for how this story is going to play out because it could just be cheesy. And now, there's nothing wrong with being cheesy, but this game feels like it's supposed to be taken seriously, which brings me to my next point, the voice acting. So far, the voice acting is just not good. The way that Frey engages with enemies in combat, her emotional tone is so lifeless and boring. I'm going to show some examples in the video, but the banter between Frey and the bracelet as well, it just doesn't work for the time being. And this is something that concerns me a lot as we have to spend the most time with these two main characters.
Hey.
Well, do something.
Yeah.
I'm just getting started.
Damn right you are.
That went well.
You bet it did. That asshole's going nowhere.
It's okay if things are a little hokey or a little weird, but as of now, it's just bad. Hopefully this is an old build with some outdated voice acting files because yeah, it's just not good. But how does the open world feel? Well, it's not really good or bad as of now. Again, too soon to tell. But from where I stand, things are seeming a little generic from what this demo has to offer. I'm hoping things flush out a little more when the campaign is released, but from the demo, it seems like we just go from map marker 1 to map marker 2 to map marker 3 and so on and so forth, completing little tasks and battles with menial fights along the way with the less serious enemies. In the demo, the game offers 5 missions, and you're to investigate each of these locations in order, and then you are given a bonus quest to do at the end. The first mission was to check out a little house where you can save, upgrade things, rest to regain your health and magic, as well as access a challenge book that will allow you to earn XP by fighting in certain styles or accessing some place on the map. Pretty standard stuff. The second mission was to travel to the next map marker and clear a bridge of like 20 bad guys and fight a mini-boss. The third mission was to travel to the next map marker and investigate a magical pond where you can dive in and increase your magical abilities. The fourth mission was to travel to the next map marker and find a monument that will improve your strength. The fifth and final mission was to head to the final map marker and acquire a new cloak for your character. At this point in time, you're going to be ambushed by a bunch of enemies that you need to take out in order to access the chest where the cloak is located. Now, can you see why this is a little uninteresting? I'm reserving judgment because it's just a demo on what is likely the first level of a brand new game, so maybe the first few things are just a little dry. And it's not even the missions themselves that are bad or boring, but it's the way that they're presented, and I think that's the most important part. You see, when you're playing something like God of War Ragnarok, the opening sequence is you and your son traveling on a sled being pulled by dogs when all of a sudden you are ambushed by another character and you are having this intense battle on the sled while heading to your destination. It's pretty fucking interesting if you ask me. In Forspoken, clearing a bridge of enemies is actually really fun to do, but completing the task and then just sitting there going, okay, guess we're done here, and then pulling up your map to see your next marker and then move over to that place. It's just not very engaging. The bonus mission that Square springs on you after you have completed the demo is actually really fun though. You have to track down a boss in his little area and take him down. It's not too difficult, but it's definitely the highlight of the demo in my opinion. And what I gather from this encounter is a few things. First being that we are going to have a lot of big bosses in this game, which I think is a huge win. Although I'm not sure how mechanically sound they will be because like the other fights in this demo, and we will get to that in a second, this boss fought just like every other enemy that I had encountered with the same resistant features or vulnerabilities. Secondly, I'm also very pleased with how much Square Enix is rewarding us by surprising us with a bonus fight, providing chests and areas to upgrade. I just hope rather than going from map marker to map marker, they incorporate a much more engaging methodology inside of our journey. There is still a lot to learn here with mission design, and we will have to wait to fully judge. What we're seeing as of now are bits of the design language. While there is a lot here that's interesting, we need to pay attention to how Square Enix's design language is going to develop to hold the player's attention span over the course of 20 to 30 hours. All right, so now all of the things that we have talked about so far, the console exclusivity, the menus, the story, the open world, a lot of that stuff can be fixed or can improve throughout the duration of the game. But what's really important is how the game feels, how the combat works, and this is my biggest concern as of right now. I have a very strong feeling that people are going to be so split on how the movement and combat mechanics work in this game. My personal worry isn't exactly how the mechanics themselves are executed, but more so the lack of fluidity and impact that I felt while getting into the swing of things during this demo. There are really two facets to break down when it comes to gameplay mechanics, and that is the player movement and the player combat. So let's talk about movement first. One of the selling points of Forspoken is the parkour and the magic surfing that you can do to maneuver around the map, and honestly, it looks pretty cool for the most part. So to parkour, all you have to do is hold circle. You just hold it and you can run and parkour over anything that your heart desires. Now keep in mind, there is a fairly vast skill tree to unlock, so there's probably going to be more to it than just holding the circle button and getting everywhere you want to go. We did get to unlock one ability in the demo that was sort of a grapple hook type deal, and you could attach yourself to enemies and these orange boulders that were on cliff sides to reach new areas. Most of the areas were locked off, but you could actually use it to climb up walls and do some cool shit. Very exciting. You can also sprint, run, and jump. You know, all the normal video game stuff that you have come to expect. What's going to be interesting is the combination of these movement mechanics and the combat systems in place. As of right now, I'm not totally meshing with it, and I felt like it took me a little while to really start to be halfway decent with the combat at all. Forspoken's combat feels a bit weak and unsure of itself, and then when you're utilizing the fighting mechanics with the movement simultaneously, it just feels a bit strange. It's been very difficult to find my footing. Maybe I am alone with that sentiment, but somehow I don't think I am. But like I said, and will continue to say, we will have to wait until launch day because all these things I am thinking and feeling could already be changed, as this could be an older build of the game. Anyways, let's talk about the combat a little more. I don't mean to bring up God of War so much, but I'm doing it because a lot of people have played it, and it's easier to explain how I feel about certain things when you have experienced my example as well. But inside of God of War's combat, you can feel the impact of every blade swing and finishing move through an enemy. You can feel the axe freeze into ice as you are preparing to beat your foe senselessly. You also have a lot of control over how you implement these actions, and switching from weapon to weapon is done in a very simple manner. Forspoken has somewhat similar approaches to the combat, but it's all done with magic rather than weapons, which gives developers freedom with the design of their combat. But with too much freedom, you can begin to wander, and I feel like we are wandering here just a bit. So how does combat work? Well, you have an earth magic skill and a fire magic skill. Each skill has a standard or main attack attached to R2 and a secondary ability attached to L2, and then the main ultimate ability is attached to pressing L2 and R2 simultaneously. With each attack skill, you have sub-attacks that can be swapped and accessed in a sub-menu by pressing R1 or L1. For example, with the fire magic, the main attack with R2 is like swinging a sword, and when you press R1, you can change that sword to a fire spear or fire punches. And this is the same deal for the left side. With the L2 trigger attacks, you can press L1 and switch between a fire dash, a fire wall, or a flame back shield that will protect against enemies from the rear. And when you press your L2 and R2 together to use your ultimate, Frey will shoot up hot fire spikes and lava, and as of now, there is only one ultimate per magic type. As you gain more XP, Frey will be able to unlock more sub-abilities and combos with each type of magic, while also being able to level up her ultimate ability. So when broken down like that, the combat really makes sense. It's actually pretty simple. One set of abilities on the right side, one set of abilities on the left side. When you overlap those abilities, you'll get your ultimate. But like I said, it's when using the combat in tandem with the parkour abilities, things start to feel a bit off. These gameplay mechanics behave as if they are working side by side one another rather than with one another synchronistically. Whether you are engaging in a battle with a boss or just fighting a regular enemy, it feels like the combat and parkour are taking turns. I hit and parkour, then hit, then parkour. And it's this infinite loop of just ping-ponging back and forth. Whereas with games like Elden Ring or God of War and many other titles over the years, combat feels fluid and almost like a ballet where the enemy and protagonist are in a seamless dance that ends with one of them eating dirt. I haven't quite found that flow state yet with Forspoken, and that's okay. Maybe I need more time with it. Maybe when the skill tree starts to fill out a little more, the other combos will start to add to the combat. I actually did try to unlock a couple of movesets inside of the game's skill tree. Some of them worked, and others said that they were unlocked but didn't really do anything when I attempted to activate them. However, I'm sure this is just an issue with the demo and not of the game itself. Now, it does look like we are going to have some way to create builds in this game. Each magic set has its own skill tree, as you can see on screen, and if you notice, Frey's magic skill tree is one of Earth, and the main villain of the game, Scylla, obtains the fire magic, and it looks like Frey has access to both. Of course, narratively, we're not sure why, but perhaps the bracelet was once Scylla's. But I am wondering if we are going to be able to acquire more skills from other powerful witches and wizards along the way in our travels of Athia. Regardless, it seems like these skill trees work like normal, trading XP for new methods of combat and movement and magic, but it looks like you can dive a little deeper into your own personal creations with the nail buffs and the magic cloaks. Nail buffs are exactly what they sound like. You are able to paint the nails on your hand for extra damage buffs and things like that. You also have a magic necklace that can trigger things like auto heal when you kill an enemy, as well as the cloak, which does similar things like recharge your magic meter faster and things of that nature. All of these buff mechanics seem to be able to be upgraded, which allows you to host multiple magic skills per buff, which I think will help to diversify the gameplay loops in Forsaken, as well as provide different approaches to combat with various enemies. Speaking of enemies and bosses, we should talk about them. In this first biome, I noticed a lot of enemy types. There are little men or like little creatures. There are flying bird people, regular birds, alligators, these deer things, and then there are small variations of them in between. And I think for a fairly small, hour-long playthrough, this was a nice way to wet my beak as to the different types of enemies that we can expect. Engagement of each enemy is kind of the same for the time being. This has to do with the fact that the combat is a bit spammy, and since you have two magic types, enemies are either able to be hit by fire magic or earth magic. The low-level enemies are usually able to be hit with whatever you want, but for the most part, you have to pivot back and forth between your abilities to ensure that enemies actually die. Once you damage them enough, they will flip over to expose their bellies, and then you can hit triangle and do a finishing move or just some sort of like special move. This is pretty much the same loop for every enemy over and over again, so it's up to you to make it fun. And I don't think that this is a good thing or a bad thing, it just is an approach to combat that's in a lot of different games. I just really hope that the combat systems themselves deepen so that when we do engage with all these different enemy types, the encounters themselves feel distinct and memorable. I'm really not trying to fight a magnificent boss where the stakes have never been higher to then move on to the next level where a low-level foot soldier is taken out in the exact same way. I honestly feel like that cheapens things and makes me not as invested into the character's story arc and makes me feel like I kind of wasted my money in some sense because I'm trying to experience this world and all of the riches that it has to offer. As I alluded to in the beginning of this video, the overarching theme here is let's wait and see. And I really don't like to have to say that because I really wanted this game to wow me from the beginning and have me begging for more, have us all begging for more. I certainly don't think that Forspoken is going to suck or be the worst game that I've ever played. As of this moment, if I were to take a guess, I would say that it's going to be about average. Between the weird mixing of artistic stylization, uneventful combat paralleled with movement mechanics that don't quite seem to fit together, it seems that we are in for a semi-generic open world game with a 2-year exclusivity deal for PlayStation only. So let's keep our fingers crossed for January of 2023 and hope that this game is really amazing because I want it to be. I am always hyped for a great game, and it's even better when a game that you were unsure of turns around and surprises you. But ladies and gentlemen, what do you think? Are you interested in Forspoken? If so, what about it intrigues you? Do you think it will be a success, a failure, or just plain forgettable? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.